welcome, welcome. My name's Avril McIntyre, and I'm the chair of the Bark and Dagenham Collective, and also lead an organisation locally called Community Resources. And it's really amazing to have you all here, and our guests online as well. 14 participants so far, and I'm sure there's more coming. So we're just going to kick off because the guys online will only be here for the talky bit, and then we'll have some time afterwards to network. There's going to be some food and some drinks that are being served, and feel free to hang around and be around for that. This is the first of 4 conversations that are really coming after the launch of the report that Ratio did, which was really tracking the journey of the BD Collective for the last 4 years. If you haven't already seen it, do get a chance to read it through. We will be putting it out, sending it out with a post-event communications, and it was also part of the invitation. So you might have, but read it, it's worth reading. Sometimes you can look at things and think, oh, that's good. Good summary at the beginning as well. Few housekeeping rules. Phones, please put them on silent. Check if mine is. Hashtag, if you are doing any social media, just use the hashtag Togther We Lead, which is on the wall. It'd be great if you do want to do any comments or things on that. That would be fantastic. And the toilets are out that door you came in, not the front door, this door inside, and on the left as we walk towards that. There is going to be a photographer. The filming, we are being filmed, but it's mainly the backs of your head, so that should be okay. But if you don't want to be in the film, just indicate. But if you don't want a photographer to be in the photographs, then Alex, who is in the red shirt, just make sure he knows. And we're asking people to put a wee star on their badge, and then you'll be looking for that. Or just be rude to him when he comes and say, no, sorry, Alex, you'll cope. So just to start, I just want to say a huge thank you, first of all, to Karen and the Beck team for hosting us here in this lovely venue and preparing all the drinks and the snacks, but also to you for attending. And especially those among us who have been part of the BD Collective. They've taken the brave step of trying something different, of deciding to collaborate, deciding to get in the mix. And there's a number of you here tonight, and I just thank you for that. It's not always been easy, but it's part of the journey of learning how to do something different. So let me just a little background, just as we get started. The Bark and Dagenham Collective is a network of networks. It's driven by a set of values, and those values are connection, trust, accountability, and power sharing. And we chose to do it on a value basis because we wanted to focus on the why and the how. And the interesting thing, the what gets developed by the people who come together to address the issues that we discover. We don't know what the what is, but the people who are closest to the issues have to decide what the what is. But the collective's role is to create that environment for the why and the how. And that's why values were so critical. We're in the 4th year. It's amazing, hard to believe. And we're kind of taking stock at the moment about the next phase, and we'll be talking about that over the next few months, and a number of you are already involved. But it's not often when I stop and think positively about something. I kind of like, when things work, I kind of think, oh, good, that worked. Let's focus on what's not working. Juro loves me for that. But I want to take a minute tonight just to kind of say what has worked and what has been happening. And the collective was set up in 2019. Then I don't know if you any remember, but we had a global pandemic. So we were heavily involved in a very quick response to that. But we're not going to talk about that because frankly, the whole world was involved in a quick response to that. The interesting thing is we built on that together with partners. And over the last 18 months, we've secured £2.2 million in various consortia that has developed, with around 50 organisations being involved in that, large and small organisations. The thing I love now is the social sector has been recognised as an equal partner, and I'm having less conversations with my statutory colleagues by saying, no, we're not going to send a VCS representative. If you want to engage with civil society, let's find a different way to do that. And we're not just going to turn up at an event and tick a box. And that's really been heard, and it's really changing. And it takes time, but it's really changing. Are we there? No, of course we're not there. We have to go wider. You know, it's great that 50 organisations are involved in consortiums, and more involved in networks. But there's hundreds of organisations across this borough. If you read Michael's report, he would say 5,000. We're in constant dialogue about that. But we're just scratching the surface. And the really interesting thing is there's huge opportunity now. So we're not scrabbling around trying to find opportunity. In the last month alone, and I've just got to remember this because there's so many things happening, we've been sought out by commissioners and funders to co-design and co-deliver new ways of working services, recognising that the services that have been offered are not always the answer. That includes talking to health colleagues and public health colleagues around new ways to look at hospital discharge, new ways to look at community responses around the whole issue of death and dying at home. We're looking at a new social value strategy and working a charter so that where our suppliers in the borough are investing, that we do that in a way that's useful to the social sector. How many more times do we need a volunteer to paint a fence? We're actually going to be really creative in looking at that. We're building on the localities model to make sure that we at neighbourhood level, residents can get the help they need when they need it, including them being part of that help. And they're also looking at a new approach to community assets. And how do we make that multi-use, really, really vibrant social spaces for residents right across the borough? And we were just talking this morning with the guys who working with the food network. We've got a food coordinator role in that now with the food network. And they're starting to look at a centralized space for food distribution. You know, these things are really quite radical, really quite different, and being led by the social sector. And the funders are seeking us out because they recognise now that when they talk to the BD Collective, they're not talking to one organisation, and they're certainly not talking to me. They have the opportunity to talk to many hundreds of organisations. And we very quickly connect them to the people who are closest to the issues and what's going on. And we're increasingly seeing that at work. So things are led by those who are close, who know what's going on, and who are willing to open the door to really look at new solutions through. So just as I conclude, you know, we know this is a huge time of challenge. Terry Miller was just saying when he came in, you feel the bite now across the board. It's a tough world. We ourselves feel it. And for residents in this borough, there's an opportunity to start to look at things differently. And we can do that in a different way. We can find creative ways to tackle deep social issues. And I guess the question I ask at least once a week, if not 7 times a week, is are we willing to mold and merge our visions and our models and our solutions with others, not give them up, because each one is really important, but merge them with others to find a solution that we've maybe not had before, a way of doing things that we haven't tried before that will actually tackle some of these stubborn issues. And this is the opportunity to see. So these conversations are the start of something. It's a provocation, it's a challenge, and it's an encouragement to say, what does it look like if civil society started to take the lead when there's a very broken system all around us? So I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to introduce Councillor Ashraf, Deputy Leader of Barton Dagenham Council. And the reason we've invited Councillor Ashraf to kick off this series of 4 is because the council took a very bold and brave step 4 years ago to fund an entity, a thing that had a form, but it didn't really have a form, had an idea, but didn't really have an idea. And they took a bold and brave decision to say, we're going to invest in this. And they have invested over the last 4 years and create a new way of looking at things and worked with us in that. And this felt really important to say we recognise that investment and that bold and brave step and hope you don't regret it. But we wanted you to kick off this series. And then, well, I'll tell you what's happening after that. So, Councillor Ashraf. Oh, yeah, give me a second. The latecomers walk the walk of shame. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Before I start, I would like, if anyone here celebrates Eid, I would like to wish you Eid Mubarak today. Anyone online, if anyone celebrates as well, I wish you all Eid Mubarak and also a joyous and prosperous Eid. So it's lovely to be here. I'm clearly like well dressed. Don't worry, I'm not gonna, compare myself to anybody else. But it's absolutely brilliant to hear from you, Avril, and definitely we do not regret it. It was, a bold decision. It was something that we really were looking forward to. If we would have to do it again, I think we would do it again, definitely. So in 2018, Barking and Dagenham Council developed a long-term vision for how we would work with and support the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. We took a chance and a new way of working that would share power between the council and the community. In order for us to tackle local issues in collaboration rather than in competition. 10 social sector leaders in the borough came together to establish the BD Collective, a network of networks, including the youth, social care, mental health, food, and many more. And most importantly, a network adopting the values of connection, trust, and shared accountability. The council commissioned the BD Collective to coordinate this new relationship between the sector and the council, and in parallel supported the establishment of a place-based giving organization by kickstarting the endowment for BD Giving, from whom we will hear a bit more. BD Giving allows local people to make important funding decisions in the borough of how grant and are distributed to small enterprises and organizations. And just a few days ago, I was talking about BD Giving in Bradford, and they were like quite impressed. So I think that you might hear from them. So it's quite something that I'm very, very proud of, especially that it's led by residents. And they were asking me, "Are you sure that you want to give them that much power?" And I said, like, "Yeah, definitely." So likewise, the Cost of Living Alliance is helping to connect and guide residents to support the network and foster a relationship that can prevent those from reaching crisis point. And I know that many here have been key to this. And during the pandemic, I know that a partnership approach to help isolated people, food, medication, etc., were established pretty quickly. And I know you said that it was everywhere else, but I think that I take a lot of pride in saying that it was very quick. And before even Boris announced the first lockdown, we were ready. And I think that we have to give it to the sector and people like a lot of you are here that worked tremendously hard. But it did highlight for us that the trust in people and in local partnership is really important. So you may ask, where are we now? Well, we are better connected. Partners work together to support residents. BD Giving has been endowed with over 1 million with funding and investment decisions made by a panel of local people. Community organizations across the borough have worked together to help the cost of living crisis. There is a consortium of approaches for funding which have been established surrounding issues such as social isolation, and the Barking Enterprise Centre has supported a multiple of small enterprises to grow and flourish across our borough. And most importantly, the BD Collective stretches 9 networks covering a range of issues that I've mentioned earlier as well. So the collective
has expanded, things have changed, we've moved on, but still, it still occupies a tiny part of the civil society. So my question to you are, how can we increase BD Collective's ambition to scale to ensure more groups take part and the breadth of civil society is connected? The whole of civil society is more than the sum of the parts. How can we work together in Barking and Dagenham with and for our residents? And welcome the fourth quadrant approach, where civil society actors come together to define and resolve social problems that our residents face. So these are the questions that I'm putting to you, and I'm sure that, you know, through those series of events, we will definitely come to something. we must come to something, but we will work together on this. And again, for me, it's something that I'm really proud of, that as a borough, we are thinking outside the box. We are trying new ways. We are often trying to be bold, and you know what, it's not perfect. And I'm not saying that, you know, this is like a high-speed train and we want to do a lot of things quickly. Well, the quicker the better, but I would want to have quality over the speed of things that we are doing, to have a proper base of what we are achieving here in Barking and Dagenham. So we've got not only a good collaboration, but also a partnership, and also that our residents feel very proud to live here and have the best future they can possibly imagine. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ashraf. We've got some just come in, you're fine. And welcome more onto online as well. So now we are moving to the keynote speaker, who is Dame Julia Unwin. And Julia, I heard Julia speak when she was launching the Civil Society Futures Report, and it really had quite an effect on me, because the challenge she was bringing then is very similar to what we're talking about tonight. And so actually I've always felt Julia's got a key investment in BD Collective, even though she didn't even know it. So it's great we've got her online tonight. It's amazing how we can do these things now. It's a shame it wasn't possible in person, but that's okay. So Julia is going to come now and speak to us. And then when Julia finishes, Jérôme de Villedegoy, Chief Executive of BD Giving, is going to lead the conversation for us in the room and those online. And it's not a question and answer. It's not a panel. It's a conversation that Julia will be part of, where we can actually reflect and contribute what we're saying. Yeah. So do we have it like so as it comes on the screen?
You got me?
Yeah.
Like me to start. Thank you. And thank you for that welcome, Avril. I'm so sorry I'm not with you in Barking and Dagenham, which would make this conversation much easier. I can tell you I'm in York, where there is the most amazing thunderstorm going. So if anything crashes, that's all it is. It is a real pleasure to hear so much about what's happened in Barking and Dagenham, and to claim some tiny bit of credit, because as I say, I didn't even know Avril was in the audience when I was speaking. But in 2018, when we launched the results of an inquiry into the future of civil society in England, where we'd listened to people up and down the country, I said then that I thought, and I believe to this day, that the problems and challenges of our global, impoverished, challenging world would never be met without the leadership of civil society. That the only way in which we would get through what we were facing, and remember this was 2018, was with re-energized, renewed, refreshed civil society. And it is an enormous pleasure to hear just a little bit about what's happening in Barking and Dagenham. What we talked about then was the rolling crises that we were facing. And I'm always a bit anxious about this conversation, because although it's fashionable to talk about a perma-crisis, for people in boroughs like Barking and Dagenham, you're never out of crisis. You've been through the deindustrialisation progress, waves of change, constant development. There is a permanent crisis that people face. And I believe what we witnessed when we did the research for the inquiry, but even more since we observed what happened in the pandemic, is a recognition we will never get through the challenges ahead of us without a renewed, reinvigorated civil society. And that what we used to do is no good for the future. And although it's become boring to talk about the pandemic, it was the most shocking moment for the world, for us in this country, for you in Barking and Dagenham, when we suddenly realised that all the ways we'd done things would have to change. And I just identify 3 things that show absolutely clearly how it was civil society that got us through that. The mutual aid that suddenly sprang up. And I had meetings with government ministers who were amazed that that was happening. Now, nobody working in a locality like yours was amazed. We knew there'd be that level of mutual support. The extent to which voluntary organisations and parts of civil society were able to raise the alarm. Where were the voices about people who were shielding with cancer and other long-term conditions and how much they were suffering for so long? It was civil society that raised the alarm. Who drew attention to women and children for whom a stay-at-home order is life sentence and left them at risk of violence and worse? It was civil society that do it. And the third thing that happened, I think, during the pandemic was how it was civil society that helped to negotiate those really tricky challenges. When will schools go back? When will parents feel safe for their children to go back? How do we manage an environment where we are too frightened to get outside our doors? 3 big ways in which it was civil society that helped us get through that appalling time. And although I despair of the phrase of cost of living crisis, because it sounds like a minor blip, when in fact it is leading so many people, as Joseph Rowntree Foundation have told us today, into absolute destitution. The levels of poverty we are facing in this country today would be even more intolerable if it weren't for the efforts of civil society. Now, I've argued that the state, the local council, the police, the health service, the government depend upon civil society. All my working life, people have talked about civil society as if it's dependent on the state. Where would the police be if there weren't neighbours looking out for each other? Where would hospitals be if there wasn't a neighbour bringing round a casserole to somebody who's come out of hospital? Where would schools be if children hadn't started going to playgroup, mother and toddler groups and being socialised in that way? The state is utterly dependent on the rich and vibrant network of civil society organisations. But we haven't always shown that confidence. We haven't always behaved as if we were as vital and central to the survival of our society as indeed we are. And as we head into more crises, a war in continental Europe, weather and climate events that are catastrophic in their impact, and a refugee crisis for which we have only just begun to understand how significant that's going to be. It is civil society which will enable us to get through it, and the state, locally, regionally, and nationally, knows that. But civil society itself can be impoverished. It can represent the very worst of us. It can be blaming other people. It can be begging for help. It can be immature and unable to come up with new solutions and new approaches. And I really commend the progress you've made in Barking and Dagenham. Because what we talked about in that inquiry, which now seems a long time ago, but feels to me as fresh, as important as it has been, is a new pact, a new arrangement, not a compact with government that we had in the 90s, but a pact which was a way in which civil society would understand itself and understand its abilities. And the P stood for power. The power that civil society has, the knowledge it has about what's happening in communities, the power we have to convene, the ways in which civil society brings people who feel they haven't got power to meet those who have. And that's true at its simplest level. Who's accompanied an angry tenant to meet the chair of the housing committee? People in civil society. Who's pointed out gross inequality and drawn attention to the terrible things that are probably still happening in some wards and neighbourhoods in Barking and Dagenham? Civil society. Who can help the police by reporting where suddenly guns and knives are appearing on a particular estate, or there's a huge amount of hate crime bubbling? It's civil society that knows what's going on, and it's civil society has power because of its knowledge. And it's civil society that makes those connections. It's civil society that says, this is happening on this estate, and this is what we think should be done about it. This is dangerous, this is frightening, this is worrying. It's civil society that makes the connections that say, there's a flood on the street and we will mobilise mutual aid to help people. It is civil society that builds those deep and strong connections between people, without which we are all in deep trouble. And the A, I'm doing mine in the wrong order, forgive me, the A for out of the pact. I've talked about power, I've talked about connection. The A was for accountability, because I think what we felt, having interviewed so many people, was that too many voluntary organisations and social sector organisations were beginning to feel that their accountability was to those who had the obvious power, those who had the money, those perhaps leading councils, those in government. They were looking to funders and to regulators and saying that's where they gave an account. But actually the real strength of civil society, the real power of civil society is in the accountability to the people who use our services, the people who day in and day out watch what we do and know what we do. And I think that's what builds trust. Civil society is changing fast. The days of the big institutions have probably passed, although those big institutions are hugely valuable. Where would we have been during the pandemic without the British Red Cross? Where would we be without the Refugee Council campaigning and championing against the horrors that are being taking place, the people coming in on small boats? But they are now complemented and supplemented by networks and movements and new challenger organisations. Just as the taxi ride drivers in London had to cope with the challenges of Uber, and hotel chains had to cope with the challenges of Airbnb, so the big institutions are coping with the new, the emergent and the challenging organisations. Because that's what we've always been. In our hearts, we've always been a network of institutions and networks. I started my voluntary sector life putting down mattresses in church halls for women who were fleeing domestic violence many, many years ago. It gives me huge pride to watch the growth of a women's aid sector that can really promote the rights and demands of women who are suffering violence at home. That pact, that focus on power and using our power, on accountability and being accountable in the right way, of connections across barriers, across the huge divides that we suffer, building trust so that the networks and the small groups and the emergent organisations and the angry outsiders can also feel part of a big civil society in which some institutions have been around for some time and some will change and develop. But between us, that rich web of organisations, big and small, formal and informal, networks and coalitions and big organisations is what creates civil society. And it is civil society on whom the state depends to get through our terribly difficult times. I think I've run out of time, so I'm going to stop there, but I'm very happy to join the conversation. Thank you.
Well, Julia was always going to be a difficult act to follow. So my name is Togther We Lead, de Goyer, as I already mentioned. I'm from Belgium, but I've been in this beautiful country for 10 years now, and my accent hasn't improved a bit. Yeah, so, but I'm really happy to be here, and I think it's a really important conversation that we're having tonight. I would like to open up for a conversation, but before I wanted to make like 3 points, which I've kind of picked up by listening to Julia, but also kind of reading the report. 3 things or 3 provocations that I think I'd like to put out there, perhaps to stimulate the conversation. The first one is something that Julia's written when she's referring to civil society as being both part of the problem and the solution. I think we all move into that space because we share deeply humanistic values. We're all empathetic, compassionate. We want to see more inclusion. We want to see more collaboration. Yet, as we move into this space, we're at risk of falling into competition, competitive behaviors, and individualism. Why is it that our behavior starts to betray our values? Why do we let that happen? That's the first one. A second point I wanted to make is around powerlessness. I should say perceived powerlessness. I would say that probably all of us, or most of us who've been working with people who are the most destitute or the most marginalized, can say and can attest that there is power in the most unlikely situations. Again, it's too easy to hide behind perceived powerlessness, saying it's all the fault of government, it's the fault of big corporations, we can't do anything about it. I think in truth, we all have power. And if we work together, that power amplifies. I think that's another point of reflection that I wanted to make. And then the third one is something around, I have to read it. Julia, you wrote, we need to learn that when good work happens, money will come. Now, I work for BD Giving. We talk a lot with funders. We talk a lot with investors. What's really interesting to see is that it's not just the social sector or civil society that's starting to ask itself, how can we work together? How can we collaborate more? It's actually a similar conversation that's happening with funders, with foundations, because they understand that their money will go further if there is infrastructure. They understand that relationships are what really matters, and they're ready to put money into this. So this is more kind of a plea, like, if we want to move towards the future, collaboration is not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. I'm going to stop here, but I'd like to sort of invite everyone to sort of come in and perhaps just raise your hand and tell who you are. And if you've got a question for Julia, feel free to go ahead. Do I have any question? Who's willing to speak first? It's always the hardest one, isn't it?
Could I just come in, Gerard, while people are waiting? Because that's something you've just said I think is really significant, and it's about power. And if I'd had longer, I might have said a bit more about it. At its heart, everything that all of you do in this room is about bringing people together so that they do have power. And actually the history of the voluntary sector and the history of civil society is all to do with people who felt they were not allowed power coming together. That's what the trade union movement is. That's what every residents' association. That's what parent-teacher associations are. It's people who feel that on their own they haven't got power, but together we have. And I think what you're modelling here in Barking and Dagenham is an incredibly clever and, I think, effective way of showing that there is real power in communities, because others, the people who think they're there in power, couldn't function unless you were doing what you're doing. So forgive me for jumping in, but as there was a silence, I thought I'd say it.
Not at all. Thank you. Rodri, I think you wanted to raise your hand, or
I thought I'd step into the space, and Julia stepped in fantastically. But look, maybe so. I work for Barking and Dagenham Council, Rodri Rowlands. Know many of you in the room, some I don't. It's fantastic to see people. One of the areas that, often I and others I know, and collectively many of us have these conversations frequently, is that of the challenge of impact and what that might mean, how that is evidenced, what ways it impacts, no pun intended, on funding opportunities and things like that. And I'm just really interested to hear people's views around, what we mean by impact, and what role that plays as we collaborate and continue to work together.
Do you want me to say something about that, Gerard, or because I can't catch your eye on this screen? I'm just having to guess.
yes, please step in, Julia.
just tell me if I'm talking too much. I think it was important for civil society organisations and for the voluntary sector to challenge itself about impact. And I'm glad that we did. But I think we have to define our own measures of impact. And if you know and look very closely at what organisations are doing, the impact may not be stratospheric. It may not look very transformative. But if you look at the deep connections that organisations have and the trust that they have with their people they work with, and the ways in which, for example, a homelessness organisation works very closely and carefully with people who have been completely traumatised, as long as we recognise that connection is impactful and that impact won't just be turning red to blue or green to yellow, impact is complex and hard to measure, then I think it's really important that we think about it. But I do think that we were at risk of going in for some very lazy approaches to impact, which suggested a sort of linear, we do this and that happens. When I worked at Joseph Rowntree Foundation, one of my objections was people talking about anybody being lifted out of poverty. Anyone who's poor stops being poor because they take huge personal risks. They work phenomenally hard. They fight and they challenge and they get to a different place. The idea that any voluntary organisation lifts somebody out of poverty is, I think, patronising to the people we serve, because they have their power and their work to do. So yes, let's measure impact, but let's do it in a way that recognises the complexity of social change, not the simplicity of some consultants' diagrams about how quickly you can measure impact. Does that make sense to you, Rodri?
certainly agree. I agree with that too. We're doing a bit of work around impact measurement in barking and dagenham giving. And in fact, just using the word measurement, I think is problematic in many of the cases. And I think we've got a responsibility as a social sector to also kind of move funders towards understanding what real impact is. Because very often they are asking of us more theories of change, more KPIs, and more things to measure. But in fact, we know that very often it's just a fallacy. So that's also something that I think we should all be mindful of. Just wanted to, has anyone else kind of got some comments to make on impact in particular or something else? Dan?
I was thinking about your first provocation, and it's a really interesting question, and it's something we're thinking about a lot as well. Sorry, I'm Sam from Green Shoes Arts. Hello. Hello. You don't know. Why we're in competition? And because we're all basically trying to do the same thing. And I think the answer is why any group of individuals, whether they're people, organizations, or creatures, compete is scant resources. And I think that we find ourselves acting this way because many organizations across the board aren't fighting to thrive, they're fighting to survive. Yeah. And what I find very interesting, and a big reason, one of the reasons I'm here tonight, obviously, is I think that what the best way to survive is actually to set that competition aside and to find what actually links us together. You know, we're stronger together. I mean, that's the whole point of tonight, right? And I think there's a bit of a sea change seated in the way that maybe a number of us actually kind of view that, you know, and it's very difficult to look beyond the day-to-day of like, right, let's look at the bottom line and let's look at what's in reserves and how are we going to do this and all that kind of stuff, and actually think, well, maybe we need to be thinking a different way. Because we talked about there's arguably 5,000 organizations across the board, VCSE organizations, arguably. And I think a lot of them are small groups. There's somebody leading a football group on a Saturday morning, working with 10 people and so on. But if every group like that teamed together, suddenly they'd be working with 100 people, you know, and suddenly they're all linking together and so on. I think that's how we get through these hard times, you know. So I found that that's something that's really been in my mind a lot as well, Gerard. So that's a nice provocation to give.
Yes.
I certainly been thinking a lot about impact recently. I think one of the challenges with impact, and there's a really good article that I think the UNDP has published this week about impact and how difficult it is to measure, is that we tend to think about impact in a very linear way, like we measure from A to B, but like highly complex issues like COVID demonstrate that if we're going to have an effect on this bit of the system, like it means that many different actors who are working on different bits of the system play a role. And actually, the way that we measure impact, therefore, is very, very wrong. And they argue at the moment that what we should be measuring is collaboration, actually, and the outcomes that are connected to collaborating and working together, rather than impact from that kind of A to B point, because actually we're tackling complex issues. You can't measure in that easy, simple, linear way. So, yeah, I'll share it with Avril and Co, and we can share it, but it's a really interesting article.
Absolutely. I don't know if you want to come in on this. Can you hear us? Can you hear me, Julia?
Oh, you might need that.
Oh, it's the microphone. Yeah, no, so I'm just going to come in. I think you're right, measuring collaboration. I think there's something around understanding how we learn as well, and actually moving our impact measurement towards kind of learning evaluation and understanding how we build on what we are learning. I think is really important as well. There's a couple of questions. I can't see the questions.
Gerard, if I just unmute Philippa and she can ask.
Yes, please.
Hello. Hi, Joe.
Oh, hi.
My question is for anyone really to answer from BD Collective. I just wondered what's the dream for the network of networks? Is there a sort of what can anyone share on what that might be? That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. That's a very important question. Is there anyone who would like to speak on what their dream for BD Collective is? Otherwise, I'm going to bring Avril. Avril, do you want to share your dream for BD Collective?
I think the intention and the dream has always been of a decentralized system of people collaborating and connecting together through networks that are not about what fun can we get and how can we achieve this, but actually genuinely exploring together what is the right solutions for some of the deep-seated and stubborn issues that our communities face. And how do we explore that, not with the people that have got the answers, but the people that have got the questions, and talk to the people experiencing the issues and involve them in the solution. And I think that was always the intention, that it is not some organization that leads the social sector, but it creates an environment in which the social sector can open a way together with residents to actually see massive change. I can just see now Michael Little's just put his own dream in the chat. We might have to unmute him, Naomi.
Michael, Naomi, do you want to bring in Michael so he can say out loud what his dream is?
Yeah, my dream would be for people in Barking and Dagenham to live as long as people in Westminster, which is another 5 years. And as Julia said, I can only see civil society leading to that kind of change.
Absolutely. And Rami, do you want to ask a question?
You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, mine is just, I'm just thinking about when the question was asked, is what's a dream? And I'm just thinking, should it be a dream or should it be a purpose? Because do we all have a same purpose? And if the purpose is for the well-being of our community, well-being of population, then I think we need to start working towards the common purpose. And then the impact, I'm thinking we need to come out of the individual impacts. So I'm just thinking of an example of a curry. Do we think what's the impact of the salt, the spice, the peppers, what goes in, or are we talking about the curry itself? What is the outcome? You go to a restaurant, 10 different people order 10 different things. It means we serve the population. We go to the population, what do they want? What do they ask? And we work towards a common purpose of a satisfied population or a customer, and we modulate ourselves according to the need or an ask of a person who comes to the community. And I think, yes, you guys did a great job during COVID, because I work as a GP and I'm the clinical director for BND. And that's where I say, I would share your details, your numbers with my housebound patients for the medications, the shopping, which you guys delivered, to their homes. So, and as much as even addressing the loneliness, picking up the phone, talking to them. So that was a fantastic piece of work, going from door to door, asking them how the things are, how you're doing. I think that is really something which needs to be even addressed and acknowledged way more what it has been done. So I think it's a common purpose that we should be working for.
Really important point. And I really like the metaphor on the recipe. I think impact, it does show that impact is emergent. It's not attributable to a single actor. We're all working and creating impact. Sally.
Yeah, so I really like the curry analogy as well. So sorry, I'm Sally Dixon from Community Resources. And as I've been listening, I've been thinking, so how do we collaborate better? And I think one of the observations that I'm thinking about is, if I think I have the answer myself, if I think I see the whole picture, I'm really going to miss it. And actually then I'm making my organisation more important than the people or the person that is in front of me at any given time. And so to be able to collaborate better, it has to be that person who becomes more important than my organisation. And so I need to recognise that I might not have the answer, but somebody from a different organisation like Sam might have. So I think it's about lifting my gaze from this is what I do day to day, because it can just be all consuming, to recognizing actually, let's give Sam a call because he might be able to help that person more than I can, or somebody's neighbour might be able to help them more than I can.
Go there and then to you.
Yes, yes. Okay. My name is Vishal, Thames Life Strategic Health Officer, Locality Lead, Research Fellow, Institute of Connected Communities, University of East London Evaluation Unit. Before I begin, I'd just like to give a quick shout out to Elspeth, who's been very instrumental in our work as a convener in the Locality Leads, as you heard about today. Now, that aside, my question in particular is towards Julia, and it's about the tenet of accountability. And before I expand on that, what I wanted to say is that accountability is also synonymous with resource holding, if you see what I mean, because accounts also relate to resource as well as holding accountability for actions. So when it comes to this tenet of accountability, Julia, how do we hold each other accountable in civil society without destroying the relationships that we need to maintain for us to work together for the greater good?
Oh, wow, what a good question. I know you're running out of time. Let me have a go. I think accountability comes in all sorts of different forms. We obviously give an account of what we've done. We have an accountability to the people who use our services, and I'm using that term as broadly as possible, our members, our beneficiaries, depending what sort of organisation we are. Of course, we have to account for the money we've spent. That seems to me sort of an obvious bit of good housekeeping. But I think in the recent years, perhaps particularly with the sort of more competitive environment created for voluntary organisations, we've treated accountability as something to do with competition. Instead of saying, as the last speaker did, it's collective action. It's the linking between huge numbers of different organisations and people that makes any social change happen. And the reason I was querying the use of the impact term is because I think that gives you too easy an approach to accountability, because actually what we account for is, I don't want organisations that are not accountable to anyone. I don't want organisations not held to account, but I want that accountability to be open and public and for people to see what is happening. I don't think that voluntary sector in the last couple of decades has always managed that as well as it should. And I think your examples are really powerful ones. Yes, we have to give an account of what we've done, but who receives that account? Who do we report to? Who do we hold ourselves to account for? And I think it needs to be, in your case, the people of Barking and Dagenham, the people who indirectly are paying you all the time for what you do. You have to be open, you have to be transparent, but you also have to say what you're doing. That make sense?
Yes, thank you, Julia. Yeah, one more question. Sorry, I saw you.
Well, I think Julia partly answered. Thank you. Fantastic. Chris from Kingsley Hall. I guess the thing I kind of always wrestle with is how do we know that what we're doing is best value in that kind of, because it's complex and, you know, we want to kind of serve the bigger picture with best value in the short, medium and long term. And so in being accountable, it's not always easy to know yourself if this is the right and the best thing to do.
I think best value is a nice term and it hasn't been used quite a lot recently. It's coming back into fashion, isn't it? Because it's saying it's not just about how much money you spend, it's about what good you bring and what you do. And I think you're right. We need to be constantly challenging ourselves and open enough with our colleagues in similar organisations to share ideas, transparent about how we're spending money. What I worry about is a form of accountability that suggests the only people who are interested in that are the council or the health service or the hospital, or whoever's funding you to do it, or the foundation that's funding. Actually, the people who use your services need to know that you're running a tight ship, that you're spending money properly, that you are behaving in an appropriate and transparent and clear way, that you deal with things that go wrong openly and transparently. Those are all values that I think we in our sector hold dear and maybe have forgotten about. in the concern to manage our reputations, focus entirely on impact, compete with the next person next door to get that bit of money. I think when we move beyond that and recognise the more collaborative approach is actually better value, is actually bringing more benefit to the people we work with, because they're the ones, if you ask them directly, is this place a good place? They'll tell you, they'll know where money is being wasted. They'll know where people are providing a bad service. We need to listen and be really accountable to the people who use our services.
That's a brilliant point. And on that note, I think I need to bring this conversation to a close, just because you're on a tight schedule as well, Julia. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really insightful. I hope everyone benefited as well. I think I need to just make a couple of points. There will be another session and then another and then another. So we've got 4 in total, which is brilliant. We're gonna get, the next one is on 18th of July, isn't it? Same time, 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's in person, so please sign up and join us. It will be with Leila Kogbara, and she's the director at Black Thrive Global and vice chair at Place Matters. Another exciting conversation, which we hope you will be part of. Until next time, thank you very much for coming today. There is nibbles, drinks, so please stay with us for a few minutes to mingle and network. Thank you very much.